Hello everyone, this is Rick and welcome to Astral Club. This is Astral Time Rules. Before we get into it, just want to mention a couple things. First of all, Patreon. If you'd like to join all those others who are supporting the channel, I'll be glad to have you. When you join, you get advanced podcasts, the chat function, talk with everybody, and a direct mail for questions to me. And if that sounds interesting, just go down to the description and you'll see a link there to Patreon. Next up, private astral projection lessons. If you'd like a lesson to learn how to astral project, be glad to work with you, working with folks now all over the world. All you have to do is go down to the description section. There's an email there. Just ask for more information. Okay. Now, if you've been a member of Astral Club for a while, you know that I travel in time. And, I've told a number of experiences concerning my time travel. But all of this began back in 1982 when I was in a Barnes & Noble bookstore, I believe, and I was back in the occult section. And I was looking for books, which I would do on a regular basis, about astral projection, astral travel. And I stumbled over a book that was called Astral Travel by Gavin and Yvonne Frost. And if, just as a side note, if you're interested in purchasing this book, go on eBay because you can get it for like $9-10 or so on eBay. If you go on Amazon, they want like $30 for it. Anyway, when I read this thing, I almost didn't buy it at first because there's a lot of Wiccan type stuff in here, and I just wasn't really into that at that point. But what was interesting is I found a lot of other information, and some of it was about time travel. And that kind of sparked my interest, which is why I bought the book, because it had never occurred to me when I was astral projecting that one could travel in time. So I took the book home and I read it, and I have it to this day, and it's still in remarkable shape, like it's not even a day old. I paid $6.95 for this book back in 1982. How things have changed. But I'm going to share with you now some of what I learned when I was reading this book, Astral Travel. And it's amazing because it pretty much all checked out from my experiences once I figured out how to start doing it. They talk a lot about what'll happen and what you'll experience, but they never did say how exactly to do it. So I had to do experimentation, and I've talked about that before in the past. So let's start with a chapter they call Zonal time. It says, when you attempt to travel either forwards or backwards in time, you will find that you can only go to certain apparently cyclical time locations. I guess they were doing studies on this. And they said, we have insufficient data to establish whether or not these time windows are fixed for all observers or whether they vary from subject to subject. I think they're a little bit off base here. I think that these time zones, if you think about it in a multiverse type of situation, that imagine all these time zones existing at the same time. But what if they were these planes of existence, let's say, in that they're moving, just like our sun is moving, we move around the sun. The sun orbits a greater system, and so on up to galaxies and then the entire universe. But these things, but I believe as these time zones are moving versus whatever time zone we're currently in, I believe there's times when it's aligned with ours and you can visit it. And then there's times when it goes out of phase so that you can't get there from here. But I believe it's constantly changing, that it's not fixed. Anyway, let's read on. This means, for instance, from one's subject's observations, that you cannot travel to a place that is 2 hours ahead of you, but you can travel to a place that is approximately a week ahead of you. Similarly, one subject could not travel to 2 or 3 weeks ahead, but he could travel to a month ahead. So I think that would fit in with my theory that these times all exist, but they're moving through some sort of weird space. And that when these time zones align with whatever one you happen to be in at the time, that you can visit there, but you can't visit to a time zone that is out of coincidence with ours. That's my theory, which I think is a little bit of a little bit more comprehensive than the one they had. They go on to say statistical evidence shows that the further you go into the future, the longer the cycles get. So that whereas you may be able to travel 1 year ahead, you will not be able to get into a time zone that is 2 or 3 years ahead. But you can visit 10 or 500 years ahead. Similar windows in time exist as you travel into the past. So that was really the first thing I learned about the truth of time travel. And it pretty much checked out 100%. Got to give them credit. But it was the next bit that they have labeled time in time that I recall really captured my imagination. And that is, as you progress forwards in time, so time expands or stretches. Let us say you have astrally traveled forward to the year 2500. You will find that you can spend days or even weeks in this time zone, and upon your return to your body, you will find only a few minutes have passed in real world time. For example, when you travel back into history, the opposite effect occurs. That is, if you go back to the 1500s, maybe you could spend a few seconds or minutes there, and when you return to your body, several minutes more have passed. So that basic truism is what really ignited me. That you could get to some of these time zones from our time zone, and that as you go into the future versus the past, in the future, you could stay there longer and have more experiences. In the past, you could visit it, but the trip tends to be very short. So that excited me when I read that. They went on though. The next is color and time. When you travel into the present, you will notice that your color perception is slightly dulled. That is, things are not as bright as they look when you're running around your physical body. However, as soon as you travel forward in time, colors become more brilliant, violently so, often psychedelically so. I don't know about psychedelically, but color is definitely there and it's very rich. I at first I was wondering, why am I seeing this color so much more beautifully? And I just attribute it to my astral vision versus my physical eyes. But they're saying, and I don't have any proof against it, is that certainly as you go into the future, the colors become very, very real. As you go into the past, though, the colors are more faded and washed out. The next thing they talk about is the sound, smell, and emotion in time. Just as in the case of color, so other sensory inputs change in intensity as you move in time. All become more intense as you move forward and less intense as you move backwards. The increase in emotional energy levels is particularly distressing to many of our more sensitive researchers. I've always said when you astral project, you need to control your emotions. You need to be comfortable with your own thoughts, and you need to be able to control your emotions. Remember that apart from everything else about going into time, remember that the astral plane is also called the emotional plane. So if you allow yourself to get depressed, you'll be severely depressed, when you travel in time or you're on the astral. So if you're too joyful, you become abundantly joyful, which sounds great, but any strong emotions like that will just get you pulled back to your body, because there's this automated defense program that's always running, and the astral cord carries the information back and forth. So you always want to control your emotions. And in this case, it's even more important when you time travel because things get ramped up quite a bit. Next, they talk about your power and time. You now are familiar with the fact that when you travel in the present, you have the ability to affect your surroundings. Oh, okay. What they're saying here is you have the power to affect your surroundings as if you were a 2-ounce creature. That's what the power is. I recall once I projected out of my body and I went into the kitchen and I noticed the electric stove was still on. And we hadn't cooked for hours, but it was on minimum, I think, whatever it was, like low or something like that. So I used all my energy to force it to the off position. And then I returned to my body and I was just exhausted. But your ability to affect things in the present is very minimal. However, as you go into the future, it goes on to say that your power to affect things increases dramatically. And likewise, as you go into the past, your ability to affect things is nil. In fact, the only time I've ever been really able to interact with the past at all is if I went into the body of an animal, because they don't have the same protections that humans do. So those were the astral time travel rules, if you will, and it's amazing because they were right. I'm glad I bought the book because it has some other interesting stuff too, besides just the Wiccan stuff. They get into some ancient Egyptian and some other things that are interesting. Personally, if you can go on eBay and buy the book for $8 or $9, go ahead and buy it. I think it's worthwhile, for that amount of money. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, hit the like button, share it with those of like minds, subscribe if you haven't already, and please leave your comments and questions. Any questions you have about time travel, or have you ever had a trip like that, or if you could go, where would you go? This is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.